Hey ninjas, so I'm going to do the carbohydrate seminar which I did live at the Academy last week. I'm going to record it as it is now so you can watch it back and play it back at any time. So let's get straight into this. So let's get straight into carbohydrates. So we break them down into three categories. Most nutritionists will break them down into two, just complex and simple. But if you think about them in three different ways, it does make it a lot easier to understand what a carbohydrate is. And remember, we are classing all of these foods that you see on the screen in the same contents as carbohydrates. But they are very, very different foods, especially when you break it down onto a cellular level. So let's get straight into this. So first of all, we've got complex carbohydrates. So complex carbohydrates have three or more sugars in them. They are often referred to as starchy foods and includes things like beans, peas, lentils, peanuts, potatoes, corns, parsnips, pastas, breads, and cereals. So complex carbohydrates is what most people would say is a carbohydrate. If someone said I'm on a low carb diet or on a high carb diet, they would normally talk about, in the UK mainly, pastas, breads and cereals, things like that, potatoes, etc. But there are many different types of carbs we'll come to in a minute. Now, it's not that the complex carbohydrates are bad, but you've got to remember that the body treats these the same as it would a sugar, because they are basically sugars. When you break it down onto a cellular level, they are sugars. So your body treats it the same, and it does act as a sugar in the body, so that it is a great energy source, but it isn't necessarily a good micronutrient source. So, you know, the amounts of vitamins and minerals in these, a little bit better than the simple ones, some of the simple ones, should I say, but some of them are very highly processed. You've got to think mainly the breads, the pastas, and the cereals, which a lot of people from the UK eat in abundance. They are extremely highly processed foods, especially the lower quality ones. Simple carbohydrates contain just one or two sugars, and carbs with two sugars such as sucrose, table sugar, and lactose from dairy, and maltose found in beer. And simple carbs are also in candy, sodas, and syrups. However, these foods are made with processed or refined sugars and do not contain vitamins or minerals or fiber. They're called empty calories and can lead to weight gain. Okay, so simple sugars, yes, we've got fruits on there because there's a lot of sugar in the fruit, but also sweets, you know, chocolates and Coke and fizzy drinks and all that stuff. That is all a simple sugar, so it's just one or two basic compounds of the sugar, chemical compounds. And you got to think about it. You know, would you rather eat an orange or a pack of orange sweets? The orange sweets have got no vitamins and minerals in there, and this is what I always rave on about, but the orange has. And also juices as well. So let's say orange juices. The issue with that is, how many oranges could you eat in one go? Like one sitting? Like I've said to you, okay, eat as many oranges as you can. You know, probably an average person will eat probably 3 or 4 and then get a bit bored and probably feel quite full. Because you've got to eat a lot of, you've got to chew, you've got a lot of fiber in the orange, in the orange skin, and etc. If you juiced an orange and made a cup of orange juice, it takes about eight oranges to make an average glass of orange juice. But you've got all that sugar hitting your digestive system instantly. Not over time, not chewing it and not adding the fiber into there, instantly. So you can get a lot of issues with weight gain from having, you know, way too much basic simple sugar in a liquid form. So these are the ones that really a lot of people eat way too much of, and it's extremely easy to get a lot of calories from this very quickly and way too much sugar very quickly. You've got to think about it in evolutionary terms. We would never come across a pick and mix in the wild. We would never come across, oh my God, unlimited Haribos. What we would have come across in the summer times is abundance of fruits, you know, that we would have found and picked and ate. And the thing is, the idea of that is in the summertime is we would have eaten as much as we can of the fruits because it would have been so sweet to our taste buds. This is before, obviously, you know, processed foods were made or any type of man-made food was made. And we would have laid down the fat stores for the winter, for the later months when there was no fruit. So we are designed to eat, you know, a lot of fruit, but it is also designed to lay down the fat stores because of the sugar content in there. Now, nowadays it's very rare that you're going to get someone to eat huge amounts of fruit. People just generally don't do it now, but people will very easily sit and munch through a whole pack of Haribos, you know, whilst they're at work or in front of the desk or at night time in front of the telly, or drink, you know, huge amounts of fizzy drinks at, you know, any point really in the day or late on at night or even at weekends. And again, the amount of sugar that is in that is so high, the body cannot process all that in one go. Unless you are literally running a marathon at that time, you know, you are not going to use that energy. So what does the body do? It has to store it as fat. It has to. It's got nowhere else for it to go. So you got to be very careful how much of this stuff you eat. It's going to, literally, it is an absolute fat gainer, if ever there was one. So you just be very careful with that. The main thing is fibrous. So fiber is actually the only carbohydrate that we need to survive. The sugars we do not need to survive. We could actually live, very healthy without the complex or the other simple carbohydrates. But fibrous carbohydrates we need in abundance. So fiber is essential to digestion. Fiber promotes healthy bowel movements and decreases the risk of chronic diseases such as coronary heart disease and diabetes, according to the US Department of Agriculture. However, unlike sugars and starches, fiber is not absorbed into the small intestine and is not converted to glucose. Instead, they pass through the large intestine relatively intact, where they are converted to hydrogen and carbon dioxide. So hydrogen and carbon dioxide is what all carbohydrates contain, hence the word carbohydrate. And it's also converted to fatty acids, which will get used for a number of useful things around the body. So you got to think these are literally the superfood. These get used in the body for various different purposes. Their mineral content and vitamin content is through the roof, obviously for good quality carbohydrates as well. And it's the only one that we actually really need to survive. And it's the one that people forget about. People think that fruit and vegetables aren't even in a category of proteins, fats, or carbs. They are. They're a carbohydrate. But you got to think, this is why people get confused with carbohydrates, because you're putting, a Mars bar, a piece of broccoli, and a piece of bread all in the same category. But when you break it down into the three, when you've got the complex, you've got the simple, and you've got the fibrous, it's a lot easier to understand. And I've taught it this way for a long time, and when people do it, they say, that makes sense, Matt. Yeah, because it does. Now, there should be separate categories for these, and really be educated on the difference between the three. So what you really need to know is, don't eat the simple sugars because they're not going to do any favors. And, in abundance, the fibrous carbohydrates, you're talking about especially the green ones and the colorful ones. So you're talking peppers and broccoli and, asparagus and spinach and things like that. They're so low in calorie as well. Like you'd be insane to ever think you're going to go over your calorie intake by eating the vegetables. It's very, very difficult to do, especially the vegetables that were made above ground. Because normally the root vegetables you'll find are more of the complex carbohydrates, and the ones above will have a lot more fiber in them, pound for pound. So basically, you can go crazy with the good stuff. Once you've tracked it a little bit, you understand how much is in. Say 100 grams of broccoli. It is amazing to know. So complex carbohydrates. It's not that they're bad. Okay, it's not that these are awful for you. But the best ones, I think, of the complex ones, in my opinion, are the oats, rice, and the sweet potato. These are as unprocessed as possible. Obviously, the oats are slightly processed. The rice normally comes, pretty unprocessed. The same with the sweet potatoes. These don't raise your insulin levels and your blood sugars as much as some of the others. They do contain some nutrients as well. But number two is the biggest issue I want to see. Do not base your whole meal around the complex carbohydrate. So let's take the average UK diet. They would eat something like a cereal and toast for breakfast. That is just complex carbohydrates. There was hardly any fats, hardly any protein in there. If their lunch consists of something like a sandwich, a packet of crisps, and a Diet Coke, again, probably about 80% carbohydrates, 80% complex carbohydrates. And if their evening meal is, say, a chicken curry, majority of that meal is rice, again, a complex carbohydrate, with a small amount of protein and fats in there. So it's not that they're bad, it's just that the majority of the UK is probably eating around a 70 to 80% complex carbohydrate diet. Now, if you ate anything in abundance of 70 to 80%, you would get issues. If you ate 70 to 80% protein, you probably have liver issues. If you ate 70 to 80% of your fat, you probably eat so many calories, you would be overweight as well. But the complex carbohydrates, again, the body treats all these as sugars. So, and the sugar is obviously a very trigger for fat gain. And just go look at the diet, look at the waistline of the UK. The majority of people are living on complex carbohydrates and simple carbohydrates without the fiber. So, this is a big issue. Eating post-workout protein, this is for people who want to build muscle. This is how the old school bodybuilding style diet. So chicken and rice, basically. Chicken and sweet potatoes. Eggs, omelets, and then a bowl of porridge. This is kind of what you see the top bodybuilders, the top strongmen eating, because they need the carbohydrates and they need the protein together, which is a good mix for muscle gain, but it also can be a recipe of disaster if you haven't worked out and your muscles aren't craving the nutrients. So you got to be very careful with how much of these you have. But if you think about it in a way that I always say, basing your meal around the protein first, so build the meal around the proteins, let's say meats, fishes, or eggs. Then you add the fats into it. So has the meat or the fish or the eggs got enough fat? If it's not, what can you add? And then add in the fibrous carbohydrates onto it, so the fruits and the vegetables. And then if you feel like you need to, then start adding the complex carbs. If you think your carbohydrate ratio is too low for that meal, if it's not anywhere near 33%, then add a little bit of rice, or add a few sweet potato wedges or something like that. There's nothing wrong with that at all.
The issue is people have way too high a percentage of the whole meal based around the carbohydrates. And even if I was talking about protein, I will never recommend anyone eating 78% protein or 70-80% fat. It would just be an absolute recipe for disaster. You want to get a balance of everything in that meal and get a bit of everything so your body's got everything that it needs to survive and flourish. And think about it like this, you are made of cells, and everything in your body is made up of cells. On a cellular level, this is what looks after the body. This is what is the body. So you are just a bundle of cells, and bundle cells literally act like little people. So you are made up of billions of little people who all have different jobs to do, and they all do a different role, but they all work together to keep you alive and keep you safe and fight diseases and build muscle, etc. So you want to make sure that these are being fed as well as possible. So you are feeding billions and billions of these little people every time you have a meal. Now, is that meal you just made high in vitamins and minerals, or is it just kind of empty calorie / processed food? So would I rather give somebody, an orange or a processed, orange juice from concentrate drink? It's a no-brainer, really. So just make sure that you are thinking about your meals on a micro level, not just a macro level. So again, always think on a cellular level. This is kind of sickle cell disease on the right, and the blood literally just is not well. You can literally see it. And I've had my bloods done live. I've seen other people's bloods done live, and it's amazing to see an unhealthy blood versus a healthy blood. And one person who I did see had very unhealthy blood. He was very, very fatigued. He was overweight. He had a lot of health issues, and you could tell in his blood was literally clogged. He wasn't moving at all. Where myself and another person whose was done, the blood was free and flowing freely, and it looked a lot healthier, should we say. So think of everything on a cellular level. On that plate, what micronutrients are in these foods? What can I add to it to make sure it's nice and balanced, etc., etc. So obviously on the live one I did a Q&A, but if you've got any questions, feel free to kind of comment below this video or drop me an inbox or just ask in the group. But I hope that cleared carbohydrates up for you. I think it's a very common thing to get confused about, and hopefully this has just cleared it up for you. So just a quick recap, we've got the 3 different carbohydrates that we'll break it down into. I'm not saying these are bad, but sometimes they're highly processed and people eat way too many of them. The simple ones, especially the junk food, they are just a complete recipe for disaster. And the main thing you need to understand is fiber in every single meal. You're not going to go over your calories eating the good fibers, unless you really, really like broccoli. So just make sure that you follow this advice, and you're not going to go far wrong with carbohydrates. Okay, hope you'll enjoy that.